This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, stocks in emerging markets rose to a more than 1 week high today. China's announcement that it will halve additional import tariffs on some U.S. goods did help support hopes that an economic hit from the coronavirus outbreak could be dodged. Now, as a result, we saw MSCI's index for emerging market stocks climbing 1.3% today, heading for a third straight session of gains and, of course, its best week in 15 months. South Africa's JSE entered its third day of gains, tracking global markets. We saw banks were up 2.49% and financials 1.47%. Now, the company ArcelorMittal announced that it had swung into an almost a 5 billion rand loss in its year ending in December. Its share price, however, was up about 3.2% on the day. Now, also coming up on today's show, Angela Merkel talks renewable energy and youth unemployment during a visit to South Africa. We lay out measures to help stem the coronavirus outbreak in the workplace. And we look at how there's a community of vegans brewing in Nigeria. Now, the ongoing conflict in Libya, sustainable renewable energy and prioritizing eradication of youth unemployment in South Africa were the main agenda points for talks between German Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Cyril Ramaphosa in Pretoria. Merkel is in South Africa at the invitation of President Ramaphosa for a two-day official visit. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamela with more on that visit.
South Africa and Germany's strategic relationship is substantiated by some 72 bilateral agreements, and those agreements provide legal framework for cooperation in various sectors. And soon as the pomp and ceremony was done and dusted, the two leaders got on with the business of the day, zoning in on the expansion of bilateral relations.
Our relationship has a strong economic focus as well. Bilateral trade between our two countries is growing. Our trade balance is narrowing, and we benefit from the presence of some 600 German companies in South Africa. We agreed that there is a need for German businesses to deepen their presence in South Africa and to expand their operations.
We have recorded growth, for instance, in our bilateral trade to the tune of 17 billion euros, and we also want to build on this. We want to support this. One particular issue is energy supply. We would like to supply you, particularly in regards to, example, extending and expanding the use of renewables and also using renewables in a sustainable way.
The talks also focused on international, regional, political, local and economic issues, as well as in educational areas.
Part of our discussions with the Chancellor today focus on how we can work together to strengthen technical and vocational education in South Africa. We know that Germany has one of the most admired and successful training systems in the world, and we look forward to finding ways for us to learn from each other's experiences and build a world-class skills development system for young people in our country.
South Africa and Germany are non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and have agreed to partner on international issues. South Africa will also soon take over the chairmanship of the AU, which has a role in the resolution of the Libya crisis. On the other hand, Germany recently hosted a summit on the Libya conflict.
I'm under no illusion. It's going to take a very long time to solve this, but it is of deep significance for Africa and Europe. If Libya should become a failed state, we have on the one hand the atrocious way that the refugees crossing the Mediterranean drown, but also seeing a seeping of security risk into the surrounding neighbors due to the export of arms and fighters, and that's something I think we both cannot condone.
We would like to see Africa taking the lead in all this, and we are particularly pleased that our partners are willing and prepared to listen to what Africans have to say and the solutions that Africans would like to bring to the table.
The two leaders also agreed to work together to help solve the energy crisis with a focus on renewable energy and gas power plants. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Well, let's get more on Merkel's visit to South Africa. We're joined now by our very own Sumitra Naidu in Johannesburg. Sumitra, always good to see you. Now, give us the highlights from today's meeting between Merkel and Ramaphosa.
Yes, Uche. Well, there was a whole range of issues discussed across a number of key sectors in South Africa. The German Chancellor arrived with an entourage of German business people, and together with President Ramaphosa, the two hosted a German business roundtable today. The visit was all about strengthening ties between South Africa and Germany. Now, trade between the two countries are really good. In fact, relations were even much stronger before Jacob Zuma's tenure. But by the end of last year, total trade between Germany and South Africa was just over $16 billion. South Africa is Germany's largest trading partner in Africa. Likewise, Germany is just as important to South Africa. Exports to Germany was over $7 billion last year. And it wasn't just about South Africa today. The leaders spoke about the full implementation of the Economic Partnership Agreement between the European Union and the Southern African Development Community. Forging regional ties in Africa is key for Germany, especially for the many German companies that already operate here and on the rest of the continent. The two leaders spoke about enhanced market access, allowing German firms to tap into regional value chains. There was also talk about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the benefits thereof. And of course, there was much focus on investment. President Ramaphosa calling on Germany to do more to help South Africa with skills development, especially with 4IR in mining and energy and renewable energy, new technologies, robotics, to assist vocational colleges to develop critical skills for business, and for German companies to share their knowledge to get South Africans into jobs. The Paris Agreement also came up. Both Germany and South Africa have been very progressive in supporting measures to fight climate change. Uche?
Now, Sumitra, as you mentioned, South Africa is essentially Germany's most important trading partner on the continent. Over 600 German companies do operate in South Africa. Hundreds of millions, as you mentioned, from Germany is invested in South Africa. Now, given the current economic situation in South Africa, how exactly did we see these two leaders approaching South Africa's current economic situation, and of course how it's impacting business between the two?
Obviously, the German Chancellor was very supportive, but President Ramaphosa was very careful to address all of the concerns facing this economy at this stage. Concerns that not only Germany has in terms of the poor state of our situation, but other international investors too. He said clear and decisive measures are being taken to ensure policy certainty and, to reduce the cost of doing business. He spoke about improving regulatory efficiency, legislative reforms. He also spoke about fiscal consolidation and pursuing prudent macroeconomic policies. Now, these are very big issues for international investors. Of course, we'll hear a lot more about that, in the budget speech coming up later this month. But Ramaphosa also went further to say government is working with the World Bank to improve its business and investment environment. He also assured that good governance is a priority. Interestingly, he spoke about the ailing state-owned entities that have been draining the fiscus here in South Africa, the need to stabilize electricity supply and to stabilize Eskom's finances and the finances of other entities. Just a few hours later, sadly, SAA Express announced that it was going into business rescue, and SAA announcing the permanent closure of about 12 international routes. and also, load shedding currently. Not ideal to have all of this news when you have such a powerful leader like Merkel in the country. Uche?
Now, of course, there were some international issues on the table as well, migration, security, and also given the fact that the two are currently non-permanent members on the United Nations Security Council. So was there any discussion on greater cooperation in these areas?
Well, we did hear them talking about the situation in Libya. There wasn't much other detail, but I understand, it was going to be discussed probably in more private talks today. This may have happened already, but the leader said they continue to have a strong political and economic relationship, and they've always cooperated closely on matters of mutual international concern. The countries share common values around multilateralism. No doubt there will be much more, collaboration as South Africa takes over the AU chairmanship this year. Germany will also take over the presidency of the Council of the European Union later this year. So there will obviously be a lot more collaboration in that respect. They also sit together at the G20 and collaborate quite extensively in that case. Uche.
Well, many thanks, Sumitra, for your insights there. Sumitra Naidu joining us in Johannesburg. Let's stay in the country. The South African financial services sector came under the spotlight during a seminar hosted by the One Young World organization in Johannesburg recently. This follows several high-profile instances of banks being taken to task by activists in the country and some shareholders for their continued financial support and commitment to fossil fuel investments. CGTN's Angela Coppola with more.
Critics have pointed fingers at the financial institutions for not doing enough on climate change, putting short-term profits above long-term climate damage.
We obviously also have this enormous embedded reliance on coal, and that has taken hold of our national psyche in a way that it might not have done in other places. And it is incredibly difficult to dislodge that connection between coal and profits. We have to have coal in order to grow our economy, in order to be profitable. It's just very, very difficult to make that link, and so it's taking a lot of advocacy work and time.
It's not just about climate change. The auditing and accounting businesses in South Africa have an important role to play in changing the financial services sector, especially following their involvement in state capture.
The audit and accounting professions came out of that very badly, which says if you have the power to go that route, you also have the power to course correct. Now that that stuff has come into the open, they will course correct. They do have the power. Will they do it? They're going to have to.
The younger generation have a huge responsibility, but are they up to it? Many are working in established businesses with vested interests and fixed institutional structures that don't easily invite change.
They're all going to go back to their swanky Santon offices where things are very cushy and comfy, and there's no dramatic immediate incentive to rock the boat or challenge somebody in power or jeopardize your salary or your bonus. So it's very, very hard. I hope that they will have the courage to do it, but I know how hard it is.
The One Young World co-founder says it can be done. Her organization's ambassadors are proof of that.
There's enough talent in there to run the country. And I would back them to do anything. If you said to them, lead this, organize the troops, build this, change that, their competence is right there in the room. And I know that they're young, but there's some of them in there that are in their mid-20s that have done by today at scale more than I've done. And I've got 40 years on them.
There are a myriad of organizations around representing different interest groups. This one that represents the youth seems to have its head screwed on the right way and is ready to do what needs to be done to change the world. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, Let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. In Kenya, oil firm Tullow plans to reduce its headcount by about 40% as part of a company-wide restructuring. Now, this is as a result of poor performances at its Africa and Guyana operations. The firm's managing director, Martin Mbogo, said about 35 workers will become redundant. He added that the reduced team will focus on achieving a final investment decision for its Kenyan project this year. Meanwhile, Canadian mining firm Barrick Gold says it is not looking to merge with copper miner Freeport-McMoRan. However, Barrick Gold CEO Mark Bristow added that it is interested in Freeport's Grasberg mine in Indonesia. That, of course, is the world's largest gold mine and second largest copper mine. The CEO wants to grow Barrick's copper business to capitalize on a projected increase in demand because of the rising popularity of electric vehicles. Now, South Africa is planning to create a new power generating firm separate from struggling state-owned utility Eskom. This is aimed at boosting energy security in the country. Mineral Resources and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe said he wanted industries to partner with the government on its formation, but it is still not clear what that partnership will exactly entail. It is also not clear which generating technologies it will employ. And lastly, Saudi Telecom must offer to buy the 45% stake of Vodafone Egypt if it goes ahead with a $2.4 billion purchase of Vodafone Group's stake in the company. This is according to Egypt's financial regulator. Now, STC struck a preliminary deal on January to buy Vodafone Group's 55% stake in Vodafone Egypt. Another 45% stake is held by Telkom Egypt, which is 80% owned by the Egyptian government. The regulator confirmed that STC's offer would be subject to a 1992 law requiring a mandatory tender for any outstanding shares. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now. Do stay with us. We've got lots more business stories coming up.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Welcome back. Now, Ethiopia has officially opened the Janale Dawa 3 hydro project plant. The facility, located some 650 kilometers south of Addis Ababa, generates about 254 megawatts of power. It is built by China's CGGC construction company at a cost of about $450 million US dollars. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more on that project.
This is one of Ethiopia's newest addition. The Janale Dawa 3 hydroelectric dam generates 254 megawatts of electricity, and it is located some 650 kilometers south of Addis Ababa. It is Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed who has opened this dam.
At the beginning of the year, we said we shall finish what we started, cut ribbons and never lose hope. That was not just a speech, it was a stamp. That was not just something we say and forget, but rather something we remember every time we do our jobs. Therefore, at this place, we have not only built a dam that ties the people of Guji and Bali, but also a dam that will shape our future.
The Janale Dawa 3 hydroelectric dam project was launched in 2010. It is 110 meters high and 426 meters long, with a capacity of holding 2.57 billion cubic meters of water. And now Ethiopia hopes this plant will provide power to part of the 65% Ethiopians who do not get any electric supply.
Therefore, in the near future, we will put together a visibility study on our rivers in order to provide electric power to the wider public. In addition to the current generation of 4,400 megawatts of energy, we are working to generate renewable energy sources. From hydro, we will soon generate 7,300 megawatts from Renaissance and Koisha dams. Also, 120 megawatts from wind and 250 megawatts from solar energy sources will be added into our grid.
It's China's CGGC construction company which has put this plant together, and it has cost $450 million US dollars. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed now wants more of this to be built, and as soon as possible. This time, the Ethiopian private sector is asked to partake in the next Janale Dawa 6 project.
The Negele Dawa 6 project will require a little less than $1 billion. To implement this project, we have in our hands so many requests from foreign investors, but we would like to call upon Ethiopian investors to put their money into this project to make it a reality. We can use the express on this project to build a new one.
The Janale Dawa 3 hydroelectric power generating dam will increase Ethiopia's power generation capacity significantly. And due to the 254 megawatts that will be generated here, the current 4,260 megawatts will be mounted to 4,514 megawatts nationwide. Group Data CGTN at the Janale Dawa 3 hydropower plant, Ethiopia.
Now, Kenya is set to sign a free trade deal with the U.S., setting pace for bilateral deals with the world's biggest economy. According to Washington, the free trade deal will be used as a model for other African nations when the current trade pact under the African Growth and Opportunity Act expires in about 5 years' time. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy has been speaking to the African Union Commissioner for Trade and Industry over the deal and, of course, brings us more on that.
The African Union says it favors a free trade agreement to replace the soon-ending African Growth Opportunity Act. But Kenya seems to be making an early start to arrangements for the foreseen end to the African Growth Opportunity Act US program in 2025.
Any state party that intends to enter in such an agreement should first of all notify us. And then they should also indicate the impact that it's going to have on the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Over 50 African countries have signed up to join the African Continental Free Trade Area, an AU-led initiative aimed at creating the world's largest free trade zone by area. The AU remains optimistic that Kenya will brief the Commission on the outcome of this latest trade deal.
We are very confident that the government of Kenya is going to give us the required information. And we are also sure that the heads of state and government will be able to take up this issue when they meet in the next few days.
The Africa Continental Free Trade Zone encompasses a combined economy of $2.5 billion and a market of 1.2 billion people. The African Continental Free Trade Area is expected to increase intra-Africa trade and eventually transform the continent into a space of broad-based development as well as durable peace and stability. Kenya is looking at creating opportunities for young people as a way of curbing unsustainable economic situations. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And Nigeria has approved the signing of an agreement with the British island of Jersey and the U.S. for the return of over $300 million stolen by former military head of state Sani Abacha. Now, under the terms of the deal, the money will be spent on 3 major road projects across Nigeria. With more on this, here's CGTN's Deji Badmus.
When in 1999, then-President Olusegun Obasanjo began the process to recover the so-called Abacha looted funds, no one would have imagined that Nigeria would still be receiving huge sums of that money 20 years after. And so when the government announced this latest recovery, it came as a shock to some.
There is no point in time that over 300-400 million wasn't taken back. So one wonders, had this money printed in those days when they were looted out of this country? So one imagines how much money was taken out of Nigeria. And if this is the way that military juntas in those days looted the treasury, I credit this nation to still have a very stable economy the way we are.
It's not exactly known how much General Sani Abacha literally stole and hid away in foreign bank accounts and assets while he was head of state of Nigeria between 1993 and 1998. Transparency International estimates it's somewhere between $3 and $5 billion. Over $1 billion has so far been repatriated, with the bulk of it coming from Switzerland. The latest recovery of $321 million from the island of Jersey almost matches the $322 million repatriated from Switzerland in December of 2017.
United States of America and indeed island of Jersey are simply entitled to administrative costs associated with the management of funds over time. So 10 million was indeed what was earmarked for the 2 countries, and the balance of 321 million is coming over to Nigeria.
The money is expected to hit the account of Nigeria in about 2 months from now and has been earmarked as part of the agreement by all the parties involved that it would be spent on 3 key infrastructure projects in the country.
We're very happy to see this coming, and we would also monitor the utilization of that fund to ensure that it does not in any way end up in individual pockets again.
There had been allegations that substantial amount of repatriated funds in the past under previous government ended up getting restolen. It's the reason why a watertight monitoring process has been built into the release and utilization of these latest funds.
So for us, it is another test for this government to convince all the stakeholders that it is genuinely committed to some of the commitments that is making to the international community.
Now, the country attorney general says part of the $321 million being expected is from a convicted former governor of Nigeria's oil-rich Delta state, but the bulk of the money is from the late General Sani Abacha. And the government is also negotiating for more recoveries now from the United Kingdom and France. So we're just not done yet with the so-called Abacha loot. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break. Still to come. We bring you measures that will help stem the coronavirus in the workplace. And hundreds protest against Siemens in Munich.
Again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. Business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. Just about 1:30, let's recap today's top headlines. The security situation in the Sahel region continues to be a major international concern. Burkina Faso in particular is being wrecked by a wave of deadly violence. The government and UN agencies on the ground are now having to deal with an unfolding humanitarian situation. Meanwhile, Belgium's Prime Minister has made her first official visit to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Sophie Wilms is scheduled to open the Belgian consulate in the DRC's southeastern city of Lubumbashi. Wilms will also discuss bilateral issues with Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi. And finally, protesters have gathered outside major U.S. cities to protest the acquittal of President Donald Trump. The businessman turned politician survived only the third presidential impeachment trial in American history on Wednesday. Now, the votes to convict Trump fell far short of two-thirds majority, which was required in the 100-seat Senate in order to remove him from office under the U.S. Constitution. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Meanwhile, ministries are taking new measures to help stem the coronavirus. To avoid gatherings in the office, the Ministry of Commerce is encouraging companies to apply for import and export permits online. Those who cannot get it done because of the virus can authorize an office under the ministry to go through the process for them. Now, the Ministry of Finance is asking provincial governments to come up with more policies in order to help medical suppliers resume production. It also requires local governments to comply with recent support policies from the central government regarding financial aid, tax cuts, and government purchases. Meanwhile, China Development Bank issued one-year bonds worth 13.5 billion yuan, or about $1.9 billion on a Thursday, in order to raise funds for the fight against the novel coronavirus. 5.5 billion yuan of those bonds were available to be purchased by individual investors via electronic channels. And the coronavirus outbreak has affected all walks of life. Shanghai recently enacted several important measures to help local companies overcome those challenges. Our reporter Zhang Xingxuan visited two of those firms to see how things are going.
This English language teaching center in Shanghai has nearly 30 employees. It also has fixed expenses of nearly 500,000 yuan every month, covering everything from salaries and social insurance for employees to rent and electricity. And now, due to the outbreak of the coronavirus, many employees from outside Shanghai are not able to return to work on time, which means the center will not be able to start its new semester until the end of this month.
We have to pay 2 months of rent, water, and electricity charges, and salaries, every bit of it. Income will be down 30 to 40% this year. And we are also having to pay for technology companies to help us launch an online teaching service in order to retain our customers.
A small chemical fertilizer trading company has similar problems. It has 10 employees, but hasn't gotten any orders for the past month. All its import negotiations have been delayed by the outbreak of the coronavirus.
Business is very slow to pick up. The logistics are behind and payments are delayed. We haven't done any business for a month, 1 month of sales. 10% of our sales have been affected.
The good news, however, is that the Shanghai Human Resources and Social Security Bureau announced 4 new policies on Monday. Most of them were delays in or refunds of various social security taxes, which should result in local firms paying some 10 billion yuan less in government fees this year.
Companies in Shanghai pay for 27% of all social security fees in the city, but the small and medium-sized companies are facing risks. Some of them are not able to fulfill contractual obligations due to the virus, so the new measures should help them get through the crisis.
Company owners like Xie Yi and Le Jian say They felt a lot better about their company's prospects after hearing about the government's measures to ease their tax burdens.
The new policies will help ease our pressure in terms of the Social Security fee. And on the other hand, it gives us confidence in being able to continue to develop. I hope these can continue and include preferential finance policies.
We are encouraged by the government's concern and care for us, but more needs to be done in the financial area.
Both companies say they are looking forward to continued relief in the areas of interest rates and year-end income taxes. They'd also like it if banks could respond to their financial needs more quickly. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Now, at the same time, Malaysia's medical glove industry is ramping up capacity to meet the necessity requirement globally, especially in China. Rian Amelza reports from Kuala Lumpur.
Malaysia is the world's biggest producer of natural and synthetic rubber gloves, churning out close to 200 billion pieces last year. And with the outbreak of the coronavirus, demand for medical gloves, especially from China, is surging. The Malaysian Rubber Gloves Manufacturers Association, MAGMA, represents the biggest players.
MAGMA and its members must gear ourselves up to be able to deliver the kind of quantity that they require. We will do it. We will ramp up our capacity, we will tweak the lines, and we will get our people to work harder to produce the necessity requirements to the world. Not only to China, but to the world.
During the H1N1 flu pandemic in 2009, medical glove sales soared by 17%, and the industry expects a similar increase this time. But the industry says it will only increase prices if production costs, such as labor or raw materials, rise.
We will not profiteer. This is the stance MAGMA will take, and this is a stance that MAGMA members will always do humanitarian service, because we are the world's largest producer. So we owe the world a service as well, more so to China in the interim, because they are the ones suffering the most now.
Malaysia's glove makers are also donating 18 million gloves that are being sent to the coronavirus epicenter in Wuhan.
Malaysian glove industry players are prepared to be at the forefront of supplying high-quality medical gloves to the world, especially in critical times, such as this, to battle against the outbreak.
The first shipment of donated gloves has already been flown to Wuhan, with the remainder expected to follow in the days ahead. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
Now, hundreds gathered in Munich to protest at the German industrial manufacturing company Siemens annual general meeting. Activists are angered by the company's decision to support a controversial coal mine project in Australia. CGTN's Natalie Carney has more from Munich.
Protests have been erupting all across Germany following the decision by Siemens to supply signaling systems to Australia's controversial Adani Carmichael coal mine project. Activists argue that support for the coal mine runs against the company's plans to go carbon neutral by 2030, as has been announced by its CEO, Joe Kaiser.
They are very connected to coal and gas, and that can't be the case. Siemens wants to portray itself as a carbon neutral company and as a green company and also a global player in the market. Then we also have to ask these questions and they have to answer.
While Siemens accepts the environmental concerns, Kaiser argues that the mine does have federal approval.
It is true that we did not correctly assess the overall dimension of this order in time, but it's also true that we adhere to all legal requirements and that the Carmichael coal mine received all necessary permits from the Australian authorities.
But Australia's Aboriginal communities disagree and are angered by the threat the 173-square-mile coal mine places on their spiritual lands.
In terms of international standards, the law in Australia is deficient, and Mr. Kaiser has not done his due diligence in terms of ensuring that our rights are being upheld. There is no free, prior and informed consent, so there is no real Indigenous approval. Our decisions to say no about the largest new coal mine in the world on our traditional international lands need to be respected.
Despite the outrage here in Germany and in Australia, Siemens CEO Joe Kaiser says he intends to honor the controversial $20 million contract after evaluating all the options. Siemens also intends to list Siemens Energy, a new company consisting mainly of its gas and power divisions, later this year.
A separate division, Siemens Mobility, will supply the Adani contract, yet activists are demanding more accountability from the company as a whole.
It's not about the money here. We want to know from Siemens themselves how much their new corporation is connected to fossil fuels. They will launch in September, I think, and their reputation as a future-oriented company is at stake here.
Siemens is a huge company who has the possibilities to get out of a contract like that. And if one of them goes and does something like that, it would be like an example for all the others.
Knowing Siemens Energy will be at the center of the global debate on climate change, Kaiser offered Fridays for Future's activist Luise Neubauer a position on its advisory board. However, Neubauer declined in order to maintain her ability to comment on Siemens independently.
The new company, which is planned to go public in September 2020, this leading energy company will be at the center of the global climate turning point and at the center of the global energy debate. We will have to accept that, ladies and gentlemen.
Meanwhile, Siemens reported a 3% decline in net profits in its first fiscal quarter due to a decline in the auto and energy sectors. Natalie Carney for CGTN in Munich.
On that note, let's take a look at commodity prices today. Oil futures rose for a second day amid investor optimism over unconfirmed reports of possible advances in combating the coronavirus outbreak in China. That, of course, could cause a fuel demand to rebound in the world's biggest oil importer, China. Brent futures rose about 1.4% today, but prices did slip over 1% as optimism waned. Meanwhile, gold prices were little change as strong U.S. economic data was offset by fears over the coronavirus outbreak and its effect on the global economy. Let's take a short break now. Still to come. There's a community of vegans brewing in Nigeria. And we look at the pros and cons of motorcycle taxis in Uganda.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
In Nigeria, meat consumption is considered a sign of success in some spaces, but a small community is now working to change the narrative by introducing veganism. The new product of vegan protein aims to target the masses in Africa's most populous country on the need to adapt to a healthy lifestyle. CGTN's Terry Wangari has more on that story.
Okay, I'm about to switch on the lights to...
For every meat lover, turning into a vegetarian is the toughest decision they can face. For 32-year-old chef Olasore Osidile, changing his lifestyle 6 years ago has not been easy. This owns up to one simple fact: eating meat is a status symbol.
Meat is more or less a status symbol here, and the more money you have, the bigger or the more meat you eat, and yeah, for the most part. So it's a very tricky thing, because if you don't eat meat, you could be considered like poor or something, but which is probably the opposite of most places.
In Nigeria, none of the major restaurant chains offer meat substitutes. According to a survey by market research company StreetBees, 14% of Nigerians are confident they could give up meat. For restaurant owner Bole Adeyanju, her journey in the business has required patience to turn the lifestyle into an income earner.
The feedback we're getting now is different from what we had 7 years ago. People are really curious about healthy lifestyle, and people are curious about climate change. So a lot of people, the awareness was not there, but right now there are education, and then people are educating, like getting to know more, and there are more products that helps people to really adopt the lifestyle.
Adeyanju and her husband created an affordable soy-based meat substitute called Vegetarian Chunks. It's designed to mimic local favorites such as suya, which is a spicy, chewy Nigerian barbecue, and nkwobi, a dish usually made with cow leg. They are now selling thousands of packs a month for an estimated $2 each across the country. For those who embarked on the vegan journey, they have experienced a lifestyle change filled with healthy diets.
I've been able to lose 29 kg, and most of my health challenges have been reverted. So I'm happy eating healthy, mostly plant-based.
Africa's lucrative market has attracted attention across the globe. Food companies are now exploring entry as they test affordable meat replacements for the developing markets. Will many Africans adapt to the new trendy lifestyle? Only time will tell. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Now, in Uganda, the city of Kampala in central Uganda is well known for its motorbike taxis, which are dubbed boda bodas. The preferred form of transport is well established in the country, but has its downsides. Well, CGTN's Leon Senyange has this to report.
Traffic in Kampala often grinds to a standstill. So many of the city's 2 million people rely on a simple means of transport, the boda boda. The motorbike taxis cut through the gaps, getting people to places.
Boda bodas are how most people get around here, so it makes sense to see the city on a boda boda too.
Thousands of young people make their livings from boda bodas. Naomi Awero is one of them.
In Uganda, jobs are very hard to come by. This job is very helpful, and there we can make some good money.
Many riders operate at bases called stages for close to 1 million bike taxis. The Central Business District has the most.
More than 50,000 motorbike taxis operate in the capital alone, and with the constant gridlock, they are the quickest way around town.
But they can be dangerous. Traffic police records show that more than 8,000 people have died in motorbike taxis over the last 4 years. Some riders are learning to take precautions.
We normally keep the rule how they have teach us on the say border, because when we take the client, you don't pass the traffic light, then you stop the traffic light, you wait for traffic light. When the traffic light to allow you to go, that's the time you can go.
The bike taxis, however, still operate in a loosely regulated sector. Transport experts say a better planned city could reduce the challenges.
There is need to provide for them also infrastructure. The infrastructure currently they are using is the infrastructure the motorists, the cars are supposed to be using. Now there are no dedicated lanes for the borders.
The Kampala Capital City Authority plans to tighten regulations in the transport sector. More effective strategies like protective gear use and traffic obedience are being promoted, so borders can become safer while still providing that rapid getaway. Leon Senyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, before we go, let's take a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand looked set to snap its three-day winning streak. That's after data showed a surprise decline in business confidence in January. The SA Chamber of Commerce and Industry's Business Confidence Index fell 0.9 index points compared to December's numbers. Now, the local currency has lost about 1.37% against the dollar so far this week. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.